Hello, and welcome to TCS World Travel's Discovery Series live event. It's our pleasure today to explore lost cities around the world with one of TCS's most experienced and beloved on-trip experts, Professor David Keeling. David will be in conversation with TCS's own Jess Seppi, and they have a wonderful program planned for us today. My name is Susie Lukacs. I'm a Director of Business Development at TCS, and I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items with you before we get started. First, turn the volume all the way up on whatever device you're listening to us on. Your audio is muted today when you join the broadcast, but you can reach us in real time by using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Simply open the box, type in your question or comment, and press submit. Only TCS staff will see it, and we will respond to you in real time. If due to time constraints we aren't able to respond to you immediately, rest assured we'll send you a follow-up email. Similarly, you should see two boxes on your screen. You should see me in the presenter box, and you should see another box with the Moai statues on Easter Island, the presentation box. If you aren't seeing either of those two boxes, go down to the bottom of your screen and click on the small box that has the movie-looking reel. That's the presenter box, and I should appear when you click on that. And similarly, to the right of that is a small TV icon. If you click on that, the presentation should enlarge. The presentation and presenter boxes are resizable and movable, so please configure them to fit your personal screen. To the right of the Q&A box at the bottom is our resource list. There's a lot of great travel information in there. There's our expedition schedules. There's itineraries that are not on our website yet. So please take your time in there, download what you'd like. To the right of that is a speaker bio box. So you can learn more information about Professor Keeling there. And to the right of that is a survey box. And the survey will pop up automatically at the end of the broadcast, but you can also answer anytime during the broadcast. There are 3 short questions, but we really do appreciate your participation in the survey as it helps inform us as we plan future journeys. And we have a very exciting announcement at the end of the broadcast, so please stay with us. And after Jess and David are finished speaking, I'm going to share some very exciting news with you. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Jess Seppi. Jess is the Enrichment Manager at TCS, and she's responsible for the rich educational and cultural content that one experiences on one of TCS's journeys. Oh, and I see we have a polling question to answer. And so Jess has shared this polling question. This is the first question. There'll be one more at the end of the broadcast. Have you ever traveled with TCS before or one of our partners? Please click yes or no. Press submit. Thank you so much. Answering this question really does help us as we plan journeys similar to the survey. So thank you very much. Thanks, Jess. So Jess is responsible for rich cultural and educational content on our journeys. And if you traveled with us before, you've benefited from our contributions. So thank you, Jess. Without further ado, over to you.
Thank you so much, Susie. So as Susie mentioned, I manage the enrichment side of our programming. And one aspect of that is working with phenomenal experts to curate and share out relevant and engaging content. This is accomplished through a variety of avenues: shared digital content before you even depart for the trip, on-trip presentations, and informal conversations with experts and locals alike. To shed some light on a few of our most popular destinations from our around the world itinerary, including how the lost cities of Petra and Angkor Wat are connected, and how cultures like the Maasai balance modernity while staying anchored to their traditional ways, I brought in one of these exceptional experts. So today we are lucky to be joined by Dr. David Keeling. David is a distinguished professor of geography at Western Kentucky University. His research interests include the geography of exploration and discovery, transport development, environmental change, and geopolitics. Professor Keeling has published widely on these issues and has visited more than 185 countries, which I'm sure helps with that. He has joined more than 20 TCS world travel trips, elucidating on each destination with engaging anecdotes and information. Welcome, David. We're so glad you're here with us today.
Thank you, Jess.
So to jump right in, you and I speak a lot about the intersection of past and present, tradition and modernity, and the built and natural environment in the context of the Around the World itinerary and each of our itineraries. A couple of the destinations on that are considered lost cities, Petra and Angkor Wat. And one of the points you often make is that cultures do not exist in a vacuum. There are threads that connect them, even those that appear lost to us. Can you tell us a bit more about those remarkable sites and what makes them must-see destinations?
Yes, absolutely. And welcome everybody to this webinar. This is a fascinating set of destinations on this Around the World itinerary. When we think about lost cities, they're lost in the sense that when they were first built back in time, they exert a tremendous influence in their region and beyond in terms of trade links, exchanging goods across regions and continents. And then for a variety of reasons, they disappeared from the knowledge base of typically sort of Western European explorers. So places like Cambodia, for example, if you think about these beautiful images that you're seeing, when you walk down these corridors and you think about these images and these carvings, this is like a palimpsest, sort of this history and culture and dynamism of this culture that existed in the case of Cambodia over 800 years ago. And the lost part of this conversation is that for many different reasons, these destinations that we'll be visiting disappeared from sort of common Western knowledge, particularly, even though the locals knew that these places were there. And so that's one of the things that we'll explore along the way, is understanding what happened to these places and why did they become lost and how did they become found. And what we'll find out is that most of these places, like Cambodia, like Machu Picchu, like Angkor Wat, Petra, really didn't come into the Western consciousness until the sort of middle of the 19th and then early 20th century in the case of Machu Picchu. And so one of the issues that we'll be exploring in terms of this general cultural timeline is looking at this sweep of 3,500 years of human history. You can see on this slide here, I've marked all of the different dates and epochs and periods that we'll be covering on this trip. And so places come and go, cities come and go. That's why we call it sort of a palimpsest, because new generations, new conquerors build on the bricks, the foundations of the past, and things get lost and then they get found again. So we'll be exploring places like Angkor Wat and places like Petra, Machu Picchu, to sort of really understand the dynamics of how these places rose and then fell. Here's an image of Angkor Wat, built in the early to middle 12th century by one of the great Khmer rulers, Sir Yavarman II. This was at the pinnacle of the empire. And then for reasons of climate change, war, resources, the city just disappeared from the culture of that particular region and became lost and wasn't found again, at least from a Western perspective, until the early to middle 19th century. And so this is a really amazing place that has all of these echoes of past history, past culture, past dynamics. Some of you that have seen that movie with Angelina Jolie sort of recognize some of these images that was filmed in Angkor Wat. Places like Petra, for example, that are one of the most remarkable physical cultural sites on the planet. These magnificent buildings, here's the treasury, carved out of this soft sandstone rock. That was a major civilization about 2,300 years ago that controlled trade routes from the Mediterranean all the way to the Yangtze Basin in China. Just an amazing destination. These trade routes became so important And these routes then evolved into the Silk Road, which became famous. Of course, you all remember Marco Polo and the journeys into China, etc. So now these cities have been sort of rediscovered in the 20th century, the 21st century, and have become really critical voices for the past and the present and the future, understanding how we preserve these places, how we understand what these cultures meant, and what we can learn from these destinations. Beautiful destination here in PETRA. Over to Jess.
Perfect. Well, and I really like that you mentioned, the voices of the past and preserving this history, because, these amazing monoliths, these amazing buildings and structures are so spectacular that you can really kind of read into them and learn more about them that way. But, when we dig into the past and when we understand that better, I think it brings to light these places. And, but what about those places that are a little more mysterious, like Easter Island? I think there's something to be said a little bit for, a place so defined by its mystery and, mysterious past.
I love mysteries. That's the wonderful part about these itineraries, where we get to really chew on these fascinating questions about the past, about how people got there. And one of the phrases I use a lot on our expeditions is the why of where, right? How did these people get to these places? And here we are in Easter Island. It's this very small volcanic outcrop in the middle of the South Pacific Ocean, over 2,000 miles off the coast of South America, and several thousand miles distant from the major Polynesian centers of the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th century. And of course, one of the reasons for going to Easter Island, or Rapa Nui as the local people call this, is to explore these incredible statues, these moai. And this is one of the great mysteries that we'll discuss when we get to Rapa Nui, Easter Island, is that why were these carved out? What do they mean to the local people? And the mystery that in many ways remains unsolved today is, what did these statues actually represent to the culture? Why did these statues get built? How did they move them down to the platforms, the ahus that represent, as you saw in this picture, sort of line all these up. This particular image was a reconstruction of these moai that got wiped out by the 1964 tsunami from the Great Alaskan Earthquake. And so many of these destinations, Easter Island particularly, face challenges in the modern world of natural processes, things like tsunamis. And if you get close to the moai, you can see that wind and rain, erosion, acidification of the air is having an impact on these statues. And so that's another one of the great mysteries. Not only why were they built, how did they get to their final resting place, what's going to happen to them in the future, and how do we preserve this common heritage of humankind? It is a World Heritage Site, which we'll talk about later. So the challenge, of course, is understanding the history and culture and dynamics of these places, but also how we go out about preserving these locations for future generations. And Easter Island, in my mind, is probably one of the most intriguing destinations, just in terms of that why of where, the mystery surrounding how these people got there, this little teardrop of land in the middle of this vast ocean. It's really a fascinating destination in so many ways.
Well, and I think that the moai is such a great foil to some of those modern structures too. When we look at the moai, they seem very historic. They seem very, perhaps otherworldly isn't the right phrase, but, very unknown. And then, so I think, a few stops later, and you are presented with the Taj Mahal. I think that's such a great comparison to these indelible landmarks that are really representative of culture.
Yes, the Taj Mahal particularly is probably one of the most visually fascinating destinations on the around the world itinerary, just because of its physical beauty. You know, this was built to pay homage to Mumtaz Mahal, the wife of Shah Jahan. She died in childbirth after giving birth to her 14th child. So she was really working hard during her life. And this monument is really an incredibly beautiful structure that represents the beauty of the Mughal Empire of the 17th century. And the sort of the dynamism of this location, we get to see it early in the morning, if possible, to see the light shining off these marble tiles. It really is probably one of the most visually spectacular buildings on the planet, which is why it's so beloved by the South Asians, and has been named consistently on just about every travel survey that's been done as one of the most intriguing and engaging destinations in terms of World Heritage Sites. And it sort of gives you that feeling of the past and the present coming together. You see all of these incredible people that are in this environment. You see the intricate design. It took about 30 years or so for this to be built. It's probably the best example of 16th and 17th century Mughal architecture. This sort of Muslim conqueror that came through, Shah Jahan and others that came through and transformed this society. Just really an incredible place on the planet to think about, how did past civilizations build these incredible structures, and the intricacy, the workmanship, the beauty of these places. And they're not without challenges today. Those of you that have traveled and seen the Taj Mahal know that pollution, acidification in the air, etc., means that there's a constant struggle to keep the marble as sort of clean and brilliant as possible. And again, this is another challenge we have, to preserve these incredible heritage sites for the following generations. It's just a sort of an amazing piece of architecture.
Well, that's an interesting point, because, the Taj Mahal does feel a bit more modern. And, talking about, scrubbing the marble, refinishing the marble, bringing it back to its brilliance, it feels very appropriate. It feels in recent history. But, when we were chatting about the Moai, it's a volcanic island. These, the rock is still present. These huge bedrock, there's still rock there. The history of how these Moai were built is there. If they were to replicate this, if the Chileans were able to, build more of these, would it take away some of the magic? Or do you think seeing them now in their present state, I think there's something there. Like, what does that mean in terms of preserving a special place like this?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, because we face in the 21st century with increasing numbers of tourists to these destinations, climate change, political circumstances, is that we don't want to Disneyfy these incredible places that mean so much culturally and historically. And one of the conversations that the locals have been having with Chilean authorities is, can't you just make more Moai? I mean, the rock is still there. The artisanship probably can be learned from the existing structures. And, that is a question that I wrestle with constantly, is that what would it mean to build, to create new Moai in place of the ones that are crumbling, the faces are being eroded, etc. And it's if I just zoom back here to Machu Picchu, it's a similar question with these incredible destinations that are looming large in our consciousness today in the 21st century, about what they mean for linking past, present, and future. And one of the great stories to learn about Machu Picchu, particularly like Easter Island and like Petra and Angkor Wat, is that these were constructed at the height of great civilizations that had incredible cultural meaning, incredible political significance. And we want to experience them in the habitat that they were meant to be in. And so preserving these, I think, for future generations is so incredibly important. And, you know, having the privilege of going to see these places where we can learn about the why of where, what the historical, geographic, political circumstances were. The fact that the Spanish conquistadors never found this place is amazing, considering that they conquered pretty much most of the Western Hemisphere, from Mexico down to Tierra del Fuego. And the idea that this place became lost to the Spanish that were everywhere in the Andes Mountains is amazing. It's just an incredible story. The locals knew it was there, of course, because they used some of the rock for building their own structures. But the fact that Westerners didn't know this was here until 1911, when Hiram Bingham came down on an expedition, is just amazing. And, you know, here we are 100 years later, and we're trying to figure out ways to maintain this for the next 100 years, the next 1,000 years, for future generations.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And I think there's, you know, within Peru and Cusco itself, you know, preserving the FAR culture, but also preserving this culture and, you know, the artisan, the weaving, the chinchero weaving, you know, I think the culture of preservation is very prevalent in this place. I think everyone is really intent on saving their history, their culture. And what I love about it is they're so enthusiastic about sharing it with you. And I think that's what I love this place. Peru is just a gorgeous place.
Yeah, Peru is spectacular in so many ways. And you know, people will love going to Cusco. It's such an amazing city. You know, here we have a civilization, the sort of the modern descendants of the Inca, that retain so many of those customs that go back, in many cases, over 1,000 years. The fact that many of them, if you go into the local shops, you can still see them using the quipu, which is the little knotted calculator, where, you know, instead of all the modern swipe and stuff, they keep these little knotted calculators that they still use as part of their culture. And, you know, the world wouldn't be the same without these types of environments and these people that make these destinations so incredibly special. Plus, the shopping is amazing. I mean, you can buy some incredibly cool stuff here.
The shopping is amazing. And the food. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. So good. So we've spoken a lot about past cultures and these amazing landmarks. But one of my favorite destinations, particularly on the Around the World itinerary and probably in general, is Tanzania. The opportunity it provides to observe predator and prey interaction in a way that is unknown to the rest of the world and really, you know, unobservable, and to be amongst the stewards to this special place, the Maasai. So can you tell us a bit about how this group has been able to integrate themselves into modern tourism while maintaining their rich tradition and culture?
Yeah, I think this is one of the highlights in many ways of this itinerary, where we see the true marrying of environment and culture and the role that the Maasai play as stewards of this landscape. Just recently, many of the female Maasai have been recruited to serve as park rangers in places like the Serengeti and Amboseli National Park in Kenya, because they are so attuned to the natural environment. They're cattle herders, so they're attuned to sort of the prey and sort of animal interaction. They're attuned to the landscape. They understand cycles of rainfall and migration. And the Maasai are such amazing people. They originate from sort of the central Nile area of modern-day Sudan. They speak a dialect called Ma, which is not Swahili at all. It's a derivative indicative of a sort of a Nilotic language. As you can see from this picture, they're typically very tall, 6 foot to 6'4", 6'5" is fairly normal, and they live in these environments where they can move around the landscape to follow the grazing. And so when you speak to these people, and I certainly encourage everybody to engage whenever possible with the Maasai, they exhibit an amazing understanding of and empathy with the environment. And they, more than anybody else, want to preserve this natural environment, because the Serengeti, the Ngorongoro crater, are one of the few places on the world now where we have this real sort of human-environment interaction that is both preserving the physical environment and demonstrating how humans can use this in a very sustainable and environmentally friendly way. So it's really one of my favorite destinations, just in terms of that interaction of humans and the environment. And you know, the Maasai have only been there for about a little more than 250, 300 years, but they bring with them old ways. They have a wisdom about the land which is amazing to listen to and watch as they interact.
That's fabulous. And I love that you kind of wove in the Ngorongoro crater portion of that too, because I think we're very familiar with the Serengeti, but, you know, the crater brings another component. I think, you know, other than the spectacular geology and the, you know, paleoanthropological history of early hominins, I think there's so much there. I mean, the rift itself, spectacular.
Yeah, this is one of those really amazing landscapes where you have, you know, the beauty of the Rift Valley, the sort of high tableland of the Serengeti, and this huge crater, Ngorongoro, which is home to a wide variety of animals concentrated in this very small area. So when you go out on safari, it's only, you know, 15, 20-minute ride down from whatever lodge you're staying in, and you've got this sort of naturally protected environment that allows you to really see close up these animal environment interactions. And as this picture shows, you know, it's fabulous at the end of the day just to watch the sun go down, sort of sipping your sundowner cocktail and experiencing the beauty of this physical environment. And, you know, the great thing about the Ngorongoro is that it is so different from anywhere else on the planet that you can visit in terms of looking at a crater in this natural environment with the number and type and diversity of animals that you see in this particular location. It really is a special spot.
Oh, it really is. And it's amazing in different parts of the year. In the peak of migration, you know, even in the lull when the animals are more in the Serengeti, but, you know, the biodiversity is so different. The wildlife is so different. The sun is different. The sunsets are different. Everything just feels very special. It's a very magic place.
It is an amazing place.
So thank you. This was amazing. So I think what I'm going to do now is kind of pivot a bit to Q&A. So we've already gotten some really fantastic questions, but just as a reminder, I'm going to re-highlight the Q&A down below. If you want to ask a question into the Q&A, we can bring that to David's attention. If you have any other questions, someone else from our team will answer as well. So our first question is, what is the role of World Heritage Sites, and why is this movement important? So what do you think?
Good question. Yeah, we're going to see quite a number of natural and cultural World Heritage Sites on this trip. The Great Barrier Reef, Machu Picchu, Taj Mahal, etc. The World Heritage Site and the World Biosphere Reserve System was introduced by the United Nations. It was sort of an offshoot of UN to sort of preserve the common heritage of humankind. And there are now almost 1,200 sites around the planet that are designated as World Heritage Sites or World Biosphere Reserves. And the idea is that you have to meet a certain level of sort of management responsibilities to get designated. There is expertise, there's some funding that's available. You have to propose, best management practices so that you can maintain and preserve these sort of common heritage of humankind for the future. And the application process is very, very strict. It requires a lot of forethought by governments when they're considering having these places designated. And I think it's an organization, it's a listing that is absolutely crucial to preserving some of these magical sites, these physical and cultural landscapes that define who we are as human beings, our touch on this planet, how we interact with the environment in so many ways. And so I'm a big supporter of the World Heritage Site Program because it does require that societies and governments and communities take responsibility for these amazing physical and human sites.
Well, and I like that you said take responsibility, because one of the benefits of those, especially when we speak about the Biosphere Reserve, and I think I'm thinking in particular Daintree in Australia, is it allows space for the Indigenous voices to come through as well. And, what were these spaces used historically? What are they still using for? Like, what is the current culture of that space, which I think is really, really spectacular.
Yeah, that's a great point about the Daintree. That's another, it's the last piece of remaining ancient rainforest on the continent of Australia. And in many of these places, the proponents have to take special care in explaining how local populations, indigenous or otherwise, can participate, be a part of the preservation and management of these landscapes. And so local participation is absolutely essential, as is the participation of those of us who visit these places by, being careful, not dropping trash, making sure we don't take stone souvenirs and those types of things. It's critical that local considerations are part of the conversation. Absolutely.
That's great. We got another question, which is, when you, for example, when you are an expert on a trip for the Around the World, in your visits to these significant architectural sites and structures, and when we're visiting, places that are really focused on the past, I'm thinking Angkor Wat, I'm thinking Petra, are you still kind of discussing the present politics, the present geopolitics, and how these two pieces fit together?
Yeah, absolutely. What I do in destination talks before we get to a location is I provide a sort of a 30 to 40 minute overview of what we're going to see, why it's important, the sort of present day geopolitical, cultural context, who's engaged, who's involved, how these places arose, why did they fall. So try and give, in a fairly brief talk, a very comprehensive overview. And then I'm always available during the course of the expedition, during explorations or, lunches, dinners, cocktail hours, whatever, to have further conversations about these places. Because when you go there and you experience that sort of feeling of the past speaking to you through the walls of the building or through the voices of the local people, it just raises so many great questions that guests want to ask along the way. And so there's never any shortage of cocktail hour conversation, believe me, lots and lots of good conversation about these places.
Well, and I think that, just to speak to a little bit more about, the ethos of the enrichment program and, your role as an expert, is I think you do an excellent job laying the foundation of this information, like really communicating the theme and the history and the present of these places. But we also are able to bring in local voices and local experts and people who have lived their whole lives in these places to kind of really speak to what it looks like now. What does this place look like to a young person? What does this place look like to as a woman in politics? We really bring in a lot of different voices to kind of get the full picture of a place, because we definitely want to be aware of, the local voice, the local expertise.
It's like painting a mural or a picture, is that I can create the framework and the broad brushstrokes of the why of where, and then it's so great to have sort of local guides or local voices that can sort of paint the sort of finer picture, the face, the image, the detail on the mural, and that's a great part of the educational component of TCS trips, is that you get that sort of creation of this picture where we take turns of filling in the details from the broad brushstrokes to the very focal fine point of the issue, and it's really a nice relationship.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Well, and we're so glad you're a part of it. Goodness. So one of the questions we got, I'm kind of paraphrasing, is how are we all part of the same human family? And I think this is something that when you were speaking to, how the ebb and flow of, politics and cultures like Petra and Angkor Wat come in and out of existence, but how in the present sense are people in the Atlas Mountains outside of Marrakesh connected to those who are in Cusco, who are, the traditional weavers in Chinchero? How are these people connected?
Well, they're certainly connected in the modern period by globalization and the broad brushstrokes of trade and social media, and the fact that we visit and interact with these places. But when you look at differences and similarities between the Maasai or the Berbers in Morocco or the Inca descendants in Peru, we're all one species. We're anatomically modern humans. We're human beings. And we all share the same basic genetic features at the broadest level. And what we learn culturally, whether it's political, economic, social stuff, is learned behavior. We learned that in our political, cultural context. And so one of the really amazing things about traveling to these places, when you speak to the local people and you go through the marketplace, you realize that we're all the same. We all have the same hopes and aims and goals and ambitions. And there's really not that much difference from us on a sort of day-to-day level. Just we have different political, cultural, social backgrounds that shape what we can do in the places that we inhabit at that point in time. It's very different from going to the Serengeti, where you see hundreds of different animal species, where they're all very different. There's that interaction that's driven by survival of the fittest or the fastest, etc. And that's just not true of the human societies, that we're all one single human species.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, within our similarities, people are genuinely and generally very authentically curious about one another. And I think that's what I love about our programs. That's what I love about what you do is people being curious. I wonder why it's like this. I wonder why this is what they do here. I wonder what this tastes like. I wonder, and I think it really presents a big picture and allows us to get to know one another, because they're curious about us too. They're curious about our habitat, our wildlife. I think it's a novelty to everybody.
Absolutely. Good question.
So we have another question, which is a great question, which is what are the places that are doing the best job preserving their culture and heritage? So I would think that would be, perhaps destinations or places or, areas that have a deep history as well as modern culture and history. Who's doing a great job?
Yeah, I think the wonderful thing about this particular around the world itinerary is that we are going to destinations that have very robust and sort of deep-seated plans to preserve and maintain the physical and cultural environment. And because of the nature of these places, Machu Picchu is not all that easy to get to. Certainly Easter Island is not all that easy to get to. We're not running into the problem of visiting places that are horribly overrun. Certainly places like the Taj Mahal get, tremendous number of visitors. But I think there's a recognition that in the local community, everybody has a stake in making sure that this particular cultural treasure is maintained and preserved, not only for the economic impact of tourism, but because of the responsibilities of being part of the World Heritage Program. And so I would say that of all the destinations on our around the world itinerary, they're all doing a pretty good job of maintaining the sort of the setting and the context and the cultural environment that attracts people like us to come see these places.
Excellent. Well, and I love, when we talk about the World Heritage Sites, in our mind, there's a handful, right? I think we see 14 on the Around the World itinerary, but in reality, there's over 1,000 and the list is growing, and it's, they're in Botswana, they're in the Andes, they're everywhere. And it's, it's cultural sites, it's environmental, these biosphere reserves. So I think the space that is protected is, protected for a reason. And we want to be, we're as part of TCS, we're very aware of our role as guests in those places. And, we treat them respectfully, and we ensure that, that ethos is communicated to our guests and our staff, and everyone else is there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a responsibility as travelers through space and time to make sure that, we leave nothing but footprints. We take nothing but memories, digital as they may be, but memories nonetheless.
Yeah, digital memories, that's perfect. I think leaving only memories is exactly what we want to do. Well, I think that you have painted a beautiful picture of these destinations, of, the magic of these places, and, the need to see them and experience them in a truly authentic way. So thank you so much, David. This was fabulous.
Thank you, Jess.
Well, I think I will pass it over to Susie to wrap it up for us, but thank you all. I appreciate it. And if we missed your questions, we'll be sure to get in touch and David will respond. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jess and David. Wow. What an outstanding program. The why of where, how we treat the people that we encounter on our journeys. These are all in the TCS DNA. These are things that TCS is passionate about on all of our trips. So thank you so much, Jess and David, for your terrific information and insight. And thank you to you, our audience, for joining us today to learn more about these historic and cultural iconic destinations. All the cities that David and Jess spoke about today are on our classic Around the World journey. And I'm excited to share with you that David will be the on-trip expert for the next departure of that journey, which is scheduled for October 2021. So not only is that very exciting, but I'm also very thrilled to announce that that will be our first departure on our brand new, fully customized Airbus A321 jet. You can see an image of it here with its beautiful painting design on the exterior, and we have an interior image for you coming up next. There it is, the fully Italian leather handcrafted seats. This jet has so many wonderful features. We are going to have a separate broadcast about this jet in October. It happens to be October 21st, 2020, so next month, featuring Shelley Klein, our TCS president, in conversation with one of our most experienced expedition leaders, Richard Butler. And they're going to discuss they're going to reveal to you the amazing features that this jet has, as well as its guest-inspired design. It's been in design and development for over 3 years, and so we're very, very excited for its inaugural journey, which will have David Keeling on there as your on-trip expert. So that begs the question, are you interested in receiving more information on our Around the World journeys aboard our brand new customized A321? So please answer yes or no here in this last poll question. And thank you very much. I see those answers coming in now. We really appreciate it. And that will help us as we plan our journeys moving forward. And if you have any questions, please let us know. We are eager, as I'm sure all of you are, to start packing our suitcases and getting back out on the road again. So please look at our resource section, download what you're interested in, contact us or one of your trusted travel advisors with any questions, and we're all here to help you. So thank you again for joining us today. Stay safe, be well, and enjoy the rest of your week.